Welcome to Command Shift Left, the podcast that helps you navigate the treacherous waters of the software development, ops, and security world while also diving into the hot current trends in the industry. Join myself, developer Philip, our co-host Orvice.
Hey audience!
As we battle through hilarious real-world stories, pro tips and hacks for navigating your way around developer security, learning about our Shift Left life, and life stories that have saved our ass. We have two incredible guests with us today. We have Ben and Josh. Thank you guys for coming onto the podcast. And as a brief introduction for both of you, maybe Ben, you can start off and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. Hi, thanks for having me. My name's Ben. I'm in London right now. I'm one of the co-founders and currently CEO of Flagsmith. We are a commercial open source feature flag, remote config management platform. I'm looking forward to the next 40 minutes or so, yeah.
Awesome. It's great having you on. And Josh, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello. My name is Josh. I am a product designer. I'm a Webflow developer and the founder of The Digital Third. It's a new online design community helping designers turn inspiration to action through creative play. I'm also more well known to be a YouTube live stream producer. And kind of just experimenting with a new genre of esports for web design. So you can check out the Reloom Design League.
That's awesome. Cool. So I think it's time to start the podcast. And the first fact is supposed to be by you, Or. So why don't you tell us what you have for us today?
I will. I have a fact that is inspired by Ben and feature flagging. And my fact for this episode is that a lot of people confuse feature flagging with authorization. So while these two things work often in tandem, they are very different. One critically enforces access in the backend, and the other one adjusts experiences in the front end, sometimes also in the backend, but most often in the front end. So I think that what is interesting is how these two things really work well together. You want to be able to enforce critical access in the back. And you want to make sure that if someone's not allowed to do something, they for sure can do it. And obviously that can't be done in the front end because the front end is circumnavigable by the client because it's running on their side. So they can do with it what they want. So you always have to do authorization in the back end. But that's not enough. It's one thing to block someone from access. It's another thing to adjust good experience around it. So for example, if you don't want a user to be able to delete something, you want the delete action or the delete API to fail, but you also don't want to show them the delete button in the first place because they'll get a bad experience. They'll click on it and get an error. So these are two key things that I think are now getting a lot of products and support and capabilities in the developer space, but still people kind of confuse them. I'd love to hear you folks. What do you think? Where authorization and feature flagging are going?
Yeah, it's interesting because we have the kind of counter problem, not problem, but sometimes we have folk using feature flags to do authorization. And then sometimes we have people say, you can store blobs of strings in Flagsmith. And sometimes we're like, we see people using those in ways that aren't the most secure, should I say? And it's kind of like it's kind of that engineering problem that if you give someone a tool, they'll use it to do things like maybe sometimes it's good engineering, sometimes it's not, right? They'll use it to do something that the tool was designed for, and then sometimes they'll use it to do things that the tool really wasn't designed for. And occasionally you're like, well, that's really not a good idea to do something like that. So, we try and sort of help educate people using our platform about. It's kind of difficult because you have to get quite low level with like, where's the data going, right? Is it going to a client or a browser, or is it trusted or untrusted? Is it server? So we have the same problem. And it's difficult as well because you want people to kind of stretch the tool in ways that you maybe hadn't considered, but you don't want to do that at the expense of them providing a security hold or something like that. So the boundary there can be quite difficult to clarify.
I think it's, as you say, it's the classic problem. Like, you give someone a gun or a knife, how do you make sure they don't shoot themselves in the foot? So you want them to be able to use it to protect themselves, to hunt, to do whatever they need, but how do you make sure that they use it right? And sometimes, like, if the user is not educated well enough, not even God will help you. But this is something that we're definitely, on our side at least, we're trying to solve by providing bridging tools. So when people come to this point, we don't tell them, oh, just do feature flagging with it. We tell them, here's how you connect this to your feature flagging. So, for example, we created an open source project called Optoggles that what it does is synchronizes the authorization layer into a feature flagging solution. So then the state that you decided but with the authorization policy is then available in the feature flagging solution. And they can work then in tandem, but you don't need to force one into the other or mix one into the other. Each one becomes an independent thing, just connected.
I also think that combining any kind of feature flagging with authorization is quite an interesting way to do things, because now in today's world, we have a lot of different people that have different roles, whether they are a paying customer or not, whether they have different roles within the company or not. And the way they kind of interact with the tools that we produce is very much based on the experience that they have. Now, usually with feature toggling, we could maybe switch, just either someone can see or cannot see, or either someone can interact with some kind of tool or not. But in this case, we can also leverage that on the roles that they might have. So maybe if they're a paying customer, now they have a role of hey, I've paid my bit, so now what can I see more? And then suddenly you can trigger in the UI experience a lot of different new things that they might be paying for. So the extra, the premium stuff. So I think that combination there of going more intricate into the roles and then giving the user a more intricate experience inside the app is also quite relevant and quite interesting.
It also touches on what is our responsibility as vendors in educating our customers. Is it just like, okay, we built a tool, let's just give it to them and see what they make of it? Or are we also responsible of making sure that they use it right? Are we also responsible? And this can also become a slippery slope. Are we, aside from doing it right, are we also responsible that they use it for the right things and right causes? Like if someone uses your tool to, I don't know, for example, if you're producing a gun and they go and rob a bank, is that on you? Is that on the person at all? Is it on society as a whole? And if someone uses our software tools to build, I don't know, like malware or anything like that, is it something that we need to take a stand on? And I think especially with the modern culture today, where everyone is trying to be more active, these points are becoming more and more critical to think about.
Awesome. And I think this is the perfect point where we can actually jump onto our second fact. And the second fact for today's episode is by Ben. So Ben, go for it.
Yeah. Okay. So my fact is that I'm kind of long in the tooth in my career now. I've been doing this sort of stuff for 27 years. So my first professional web development deployment took 3 months and cut my hands.
Wow.
And so the story behind that is, to set the scene, it was 1999 to 2000, and I was working, I'd been working in like a consultancy out of university, and then I got a job at a what is now regarded, I guess, as a digital agency. And we were building a website for a big consumer brand in the UK, and I was responsible for, amongst other things, getting the site onto the internet so that people could view it. And in 1999, that process started by phoning Dell and ordering some servers, and then having the servers delivered to the office and then putting them in a car and driving them to a data center, and then taking them out of their boxes and sliding them into the racks of the data center. And for those of you who've ever done that will know that that's how I cut my hands, because those things are sharp. And then I got locked in the data center, which was fun and a bit scary, because if the fire system goes off, you die. So yeah, then I managed to get out of the data. So and that, anyway, the whole process end to end, from like phoning Dell for the servers to getting the site responding to internet traffic, took 3 months. And that was the state of the art, basically. But there wasn't an art there. That was just what it took to deploy stuff now. So I guess the thing that I'm interested in really is, and through a combination of modern CI/CD and DevOps, and like platforms like Flagsmith for feature flagging, and also like platforms like Webflow. We're actually our marketing sites on Webflow, and we really love that. And you can just deploy the whole site in a few seconds. My question that I'm thinking that story is making me ask myself is like, what does it look like in 10 years time or in 20 years time, right? Like where do things, because they're always moving as well, right? Things are constantly changing and new paradigms and getting better. And I'm just curious to know, like, are we at the end of that? Like, have we solved that problem, or is there more to come?
I think there's definitely more to come, but I actually want to start with another thing that kind of startled me with your fact. So you said 27 years, and then you talked about 1999. That's not 27 years, but getting to 25. But still, in my mind, 1999, that's like at most 10 years ago. And now I feel really old. This realization is sinking in. And
if it makes you feel a little better or worse, I was 2 in that.
That makes me feel much, much worse. Damn. Anyways, I think we're definitely not at the end of this. I think things are only getting started and accelerating. And somehow in this podcast, we always end up talking about living in a simulation or uploading ourselves to the cloud. So this is actually what I'm expecting here as well. I'm expecting that it won't be a human coming and loading the software into the server rack. It will be the otherwise. It will be the software loading the humans,
the other way around,
uploading them into the cloud, metric style, or pick your sci-fi genre of choice. And but before that, I think we'll definitely in the next couple of years see more automation with AI coming in, and a lot less hands-on interaction with both the deployments and with the creation of content. Somewhere in between, we'll get lost. That's kind of my sense, and we'll have to refine ourselves as humans. And then we'll upload ourselves to the cloud, and we'll just be the same thing, and then that will solve that dissonance.
I think in general, what we're seeing is just so much more companies come out and offer like a complete end-to-end flow for the things that you might want to perform. As in, otherwise, let's say 10 years ago, you would have a company that does just a very specific thing and another company that does a very specific thing. And I think a kind of an example of that is, platforms like Webflow or like Shopify or like other platforms like that. They not just only handle, hey, let me build a website and deploy it. They handle the customers, they handle the payments, they handle, just everything that is associated with that one specific space. So you don't need to reach out to, for example, other payment platforms. And in that regard, we also see companies start to be very open to integrating everything together. So essentially, everything becomes one open thing, and you can just pick and choose what you want to use and then just throw it in and make something out of it, especially when it comes to developing apps and providing software.
We're actually seeing a little bit of a bounce back, I think. So with Webflow and like things like Wix and other things, like they really wanted to abstract all of the engineering work away from the people building the website. But now there's a little bit of a bounce back with things like Vercel and Netlify, which are getting a lot of traction. They're kind of coming in and saying, oh, we actually want to empower you as a developer. We still want you to write things in React, and we still want you to be able to build the server components yourself. They're much more limited, like usually just simple lambdas. cloud functions. But it's a lot more engineering than what you see with Webflow or with Wix or anything like that. So maybe it's not a direct path. Maybe we're gonna zigzag back and forth between more simplification and more hands-on developer power for doing more complex things. And maybe our designers are gonna become more engineers, and our engineers will become more designers until they'll again all meet in the cloud.
I'm glad you said that, because I don't know if you saw the recent Webflow conference keynote that was released about 2 weeks ago, but they're pushing a lot of big updates where Webflow is basically going to be the meeting ground, like the platform where developers and designers meet. And it's been like that for a while, but even more so now, because they are integrating more React components, right? So, and they bring all those developer superpowers into Webflow and using the UI to just control and update all the designs there. But then they're also bringing the design community from Figma, even more so with their plugin, the Figma to Webflow plugin, to do it on Webflow. So it's very fascinating to see how they're kind of strategically positioning themselves to be that meeting ground. So it's going to be really exciting.
So do you think they're doing that to encourage people to test new waters, or is that just the natural way forward to do things?
I think both, but more the latter, because at the end of the day, it's all about building, creating your ideas and making it to reality. And so the biggest frustration and the biggest time suck is the coordination between the design team and handing it off to development.
Yeah.
So I think Webflow just basically cuts that out or brings that understanding and communication all together in one platform.
Which will essentially then speed up the workflow.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd imagine that some of the things they're adding for developers are kind of in reaction to what's happening in the overall market with things like Vercel and alike kind of surfacing up. But it's also interesting to see, as you're saying, that like bringing in the other edge with Figma. I wonder, like, as we iterate on this, what would be the equilibrium point? At some point there will be a balance point that most people would be happy with and will be kind of circling around instead of constantly going back and forth between complexity and abstraction. I know that, like, with what we're building, I really believe in the philosophy for developer tools that what you want is make it as simple as possible, but don't hide away the power. So when you start working with it, it's just very simple, just works out of the box. And as you start playing with it and digging in, then you discover the more advanced capabilities and you can bring in more to the table. But to get started, you don't have to understand anything. And I think that's a good guide. And I wonder if I imagine it would translate well into this field as well, but it will also be interesting to see how it will translate concretely into that equilibrium point.
The first company I started was a content management system software business, and so I've got a lot of experience, and from again, like from a long time ago, where people were laying things out in tables with single pixel transparent GIFs and stuff, and actually Webflow is kind of the first platform that feels like it's actually sort of solved the problem, because it always used to be that the moment it left the designer's screen on Photoshop, you'd get this like sort of like torrent of nonsense HTML and all this sort of stuff, and you could only ever go in one direction, right? You could only ever go from the designer's computer to the production website. You could never go backwards. It was impossible. And Webflow's the first, and I didn't know about the React components. That's like, yeah, of course, that suddenly makes total sense, because it feels like it's taken 25 years for CSS and HTML and all this sort of, and the tooling around it, to get to the point where, when I go and edit, I did it this morning. I changed the Twitter logo on our footer.
The X logo.
Yeah, they're the jobs that get sent to me now. Like, oh, Ben, can you change the X logo? But it's interesting because there's a paradox here, because it used to be that the workflow process would only go in one direction from the designer to the screen. And that's actually the way that React works, right? Like React's a single functional process that the components
It renders,
get rendered like that.
Yeah.
And actually what it's kind of given us is given us, it's quite so kind of philosophical. It's kind of given us the way of giving us back the way of going back. And I think that's really powerful. And I whenever I use Webflow, which isn't that often, but when I do, I'm always in awe that the amount of because I can kind of feel the amount of engineering that went into that platform to get it to do what it does. It's if you haven't used it, and I don't own any shares in them or anything like that, but it's a truly astonishing product.
Now that all of this has been mentioned, I expect our amazing designer at Permit Gone to suddenly become a full-on developer in the coming years. So I'd be looking forward to seeing that. Anyhow, I think this is a great point to move to our next fact, and that fact is by Josh. So why don't you take it away?
Yeah, so it's going to be very different. I know most of us are kind of talking about feature flagging and things like that, but I'll talk on a simple fact and my expertise where I just feel that the future of education is online community learning. Or you could rephrase it as maybe the future of community is online. And I know just even for me, my own career, I've been, learning just locally in my city here in Vancouver, Canada. But my career started skyrocketing the moment I got involved with the design Twitter or X about a year and a half ago. And I think I was just really blown away by that. And so when I created the Digital Third, my online design community, I was thinking ways that, okay, how do I even level up this learning experience online? So I'm just adding in elements of entertainment. So I've incorporated this new, sorry, it's a bit of a plug, but it kind of goes to my point.
It's all right.
This concept of a design gym. I'm like, what if we just took the ideas of a CrossFit gym or maybe Peloton, where you learn as a community or work out as a community, but for your brain? And so I think that's fun. I think it's the future. And I think, again, pulling in resources of the brightest minds from all over the globe and putting it together and meeting them online is definitely the way to go. And if we don't kind of adapt and move towards that, we're definitely going to be falling behind. So that's my fact.
Yeah. I'm not sure what would be the answer here, but I'm definitely sure that we have a problem in both with communities and with education. Like when you look at our school systems across the Western world,
yes,
they don't stack up to what people actually need for to live their lives and to actually get their jobs. And it's true for your elementary schools, your high schools, and even your academia. Most students completing their computer science degree are basically useless.
Interesting.
But people are spending all those years going through those systems, being unhappy, and ending up in places that aren't sufficient for their lives, and we're like, it's not. There's no solution in sight for that. And in the same time, people are also feeling more and more lonely. Like we're more interconnected than we've ever been, but research shows that more people are feeling more lonely and more depressed than in previous years, and we've to some degree lost our sense of community. Like I live in a nice complex of buildings on top of a park. I have a lot of neighbors, but I don't know any of them. Like I used to live I grew up in a small town, and there I literally knew my neighbors. Go and ask a cup of sugar from your neighbor, or help them with their lawn work or stuff like that. And nowadays I feel that's kind of that's a world that is kind of fading away. And it would be very interesting to see if online communities can replace that or supplement what is missing. Though I'm somewhat skeptical with the current directions. Like if you look at what we've tried so far, things like Facebook, they kind of it seems that they're kind of producing the opposite from what we want. But yeah, maybe if we combine especially if we combine these two things, if we get people to pass knowledge from one another, not just just news items and fake news items. Maybe if we try to teach each other things, maybe we'll end up at something more interesting.
Yeah, I feel very strongly about the university aspect here, because I just graduated over 4 years ago, and I completed a computer science degree with a specialization in AI, believe it or not.
Oh wow!
And the only thing that I really got out of my university is the opportunities to work in a third-party place where I got the actual experience. Yes, they teach you, all the basic stuff, but like Or said, you essentially come out of university, and if not for my, university experience where I got to work at a company, I wouldn't really know much. And I think what we're seeing now, especially with online communities, there's a lot of people taking up open university courses, things that are just online education, things that are very tailored to their specific needs, not what the university wants you to learn. And they come out in a much better position to be a qualified engineer. Or in other words, they can become a qualified engineer, I think, much faster, just because of the online possibilities and communities and everything that's offered right now. And it's just getting better. So there's good and bad things about studying at uni, although I would still always encourage it.
It feels like we're really sort of still scrambling up the hill, the sort of slippery hill of the optimal product and experience and of learning now. I think when I was at university, I actually did a degree in AI in 1994, which is hilarious because there were no jobs in AI in 1994. So I feel like I was a bit ahead of my time, but my bank balance doesn't reflect it, unfortunately. But I do, and and I've got my eldest daughter's 14 now, and I kind of feel like in kind of 30 or when she's my age, they'll look back at this time as kind of like we just didn't know what we were doing, right? Like there'll be some new concepts and process and structure. And material that like everyone will be like, we were just kind of like flailing around trying to figure out what works and what doesn't, and no one, it still feels like it's it doesn't feel like we've got to the solution yet in my head anyway.
Yeah, I think in terms of just online learning, if you don't have the community aspect and just like online universities and stuff like that, that misses a lot. But I think you introduced the community interaction component with the live updates and iteration of even new trends and learning topics. I think that's where you got that edge to stay afloat, right? But I mean, for sure, you got to balance that. So I think let me clarify. I think for online learning and your just professional development and continual professional development, doing that online and learning from the best from all over the globe is the way to go. But in terms of like real community aspect, like locally, yes, let's get plugged in. Let's invest in that for sure. But it is interesting. You're seeing like a trend of people moving out of expensive cities to more cheaper rural areas, but they still have the amazing resources online, right? So you kind of get the best of both worlds. So it's very interesting to see how people are shifting around.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the positive examples that we are seeing is developer communities. So unlike the forums that you see in Facebook and stuff like that, or Reddit, where it can become very toxic very quickly, developer communities are very positive. And I think one of the best things that work there that used to work in basic education is mentorship. So you learn not just by learning the material and rehearsing it, you learn by teaching others. And I think that's something fundamentally human that we used to have more connection to, and we kind of lost it around the Industrial Revolution. And maybe with kind of a developer mentality and the mindset that we have in developer communities, maybe we can rekindle that.
I had to do tuition, like software tuition. I did a master's And yeah, like the experience of teaching was mind blowing to me. Like it was a transformative experience. And like that, I think that's possibly like an angle you could use, right? Like if you can't explain yourself clearly to someone about something, then you don't fully understand it, right? And so like these communities have like this great opportunity. I've always found like the nicher the community, the more sort of warmer and more inviting it is, right? Like you got a community like on Reddit or Facebook, they're kind of, or Twitter, they're like mass, whereas if you find like a niche of a niche, then the only people that are there are like really into that thing, and they're always really you're like just really positive about it. Actually, there's a question, like Josh, like how does the Webflow community feel like? Does it feel like it's getting big to the point where it's kind of sort of depersonalized in that sense?
Yeah, getting saturated. Yeah, I think it's still strong. It's still great. I mean, literally right now, everyone is in London, and they just wrapped up like a 4-location tour to celebrate their 10-year anniversary for Webflow Conf. So they started in San Francisco, then New York, then Chicago, and then now in London. But it's amazing. There was a concern, like as the community grows, it might start to get saturated and get a little bit less personalized. But I think, I don't know, it'll be interesting to see. I think ultimately, eventually it will, but I think if you manage it well, so you keep it in small little circles. There's this number. It's like a sociological number of like people interacting. I think like when Dunlop's number or something like that. I gotta Google it.
Mm-hmm.
But like if you go over 80,
150
or 150, yeah. What number is that? There's a certain term.
I think it's Dunbar.
Yeah, Dunbar
like
or something like that. Yeah. So that's really fascinating. But I think if you keep it within that, or if you go over it, then you just break off into another community and maintain that, that closeness.
So it's Dunbar's number. It's 150 roughly, and it's a magic number essentially. And the baseline, or like the idea behind it, is like basically the complexity that you can have within the human mind of how many connections you can hold.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. It's I think it's borderline pseudoscience, but there's something to it that
makes sense.
It does resonate. And I think there is a fact in like nature, when you look at the pre-agricultural human societies, human groups, they tend to clamp at tribes that are roughly 150, 200 members in size, and if they exceed that, they splinter off. So there's something to be said to that. And also, I think even today, when we it's easy to connect to a lot of people and potentially have a lot of friends. Still, personally, I don't have 1,000 friends that I can actually call friends. Probably somewhere around that number.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is a perfect time to move to our last fact for this episode, which would belong to Philip. Philip, take it away.
All right, so my fact for today is on the topic of feature flagging, but I think there is a really interesting part there where usually we understand feature flagging as, implementations in software, which, have a direct impact on, for example, the UI we experience. But to clarify, my fact of today is that feature flagging can also have an effect on certain hardware and how hardware works, and how essentially we can use the feature flagging solutions to change the way certain machines, appliances, and so on perform. Now I have two kind of interesting real-life examples where you can find somewhat an implementation of feature flagging. And the first one is to do with the NASA's Mars Curiosity rover, which was obviously deployed to Mars and trying to get as much information from there. But in some way that rover has some implementation of feature flagging inside it, essentially when information is sent from Earth to Mars, there is always that kind of delay in communication that you might experience. And of course, there is certain pieces of hardware that might interfere with this and might make this communication more prolonged, or maybe cause some kind of delay or add some latency. So what they actually implemented is they are able to turn off some devices within the rover to therefore minimize that interference and have essentially that communication become much faster. And that is handled by switching on and off the controls for the feature flag within the software. The other example, which we might be more familiar with in the days that we live, is in Tesla cars. And essentially, you can have some performance on any type of mechanics that are feature enabled or disabled. So any Tesla car you buy these days, it's pretty much the same Tesla car. It has the same type of batteries. It has the same kind of equipment inside. However, the features that are offered to you are disabled based on the type of car that you buy and based on the package that you later on decide to buy out. So the batteries in Teslas are all the same. However, once you get the basic model, you have a limited range, but all it takes is for you to pay the price and then upgrade the software, and then that feature flag gets toggled and suddenly your range is much bigger. So I think, just in general, the concept of feature flagging is yes, it's software oriented, but it can have an impact on the actual lives that we live and how we interact with things and what they do. So it's just an extension of what we might understand them to be.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, it's kind of wild that like software up until the concept of feature flags was kind of created, you deploy your software and there were no adjustments or anything anywhere in that platform, right? It was like you'd seal it down, you'd lock it down, you'd deploy it, and that would be the only configuration that we're running. And that's completely unique in engineering, right? Anything that you buy, like a bicycle or maybe not a Tesla, but a car, a combustion engine or a lawnmower or, an air conditioner, there's adjustments that you can make on all of those things, right? Like my bicycle's I can adjust the brakes, I can adjust the gears, I can adjust the seat, I can adjust, there's probably like 8 adjustments on the bike, but you get a software package and there's, it used to be 10 years, there was no, if you wanted to change the behavior, you'd need to restart the whole thing. The least thing you could do is restart it with some new environment variables or something. Like before that, it would be like recompile the whole thing and then deploy it to everybody. And so, I think, like people are like, oh, that's kind of wild that, a robot on Mars has these adjustments, but if like engineers have been doing that for decades, centuries. I guess software engineers kind of, I don't know. Yeah, they I guess maybe they just forgot about it, or it was just hard to do at the time. Right now we've got global low latency internet and blah blah blah. But yeah, it's in a way it's surprising, but in a way to me it's kind of unsurprising.
It kind of makes me think, especially the Mars rover effect. It makes me think about maybe we're feature flagged as well. So think, for example, about the fight or flight response. Like when that triggers, so first of all, it turns off the stomach, expel everything from there. Also change the way your mind works. We focus on have high adrenaline. You're now either running or fighting. That's it. So yeah, maybe feature flagging is a much more deeper and more old concept than we've realized.
So the question is now, going in that direction, once we're uploaded into the cloud, like you've mentioned previously, how do feature flags affect us then?
It starts with Elon's Neuralink, right? That's the first step.
You're getting into actually a very deep philosophical question of what is you? Like, are you just your cognition, or is the way you're sensing the world part of you? Like the fact you're getting certain signals from your body, the way you see things, the way you smell things, a lot of them are unique to the physical machine you call your body, your mecha bot that you're actually using, your meat bot that you're using to work around. And if those change, are you still you?
What if social media, the news, is part of feature flagging human social psychology?
Human society. Oh, wow.
Ooh, with different cities, different news.
And I have a surprise guest for this episode, the Illuminati. All of them.
People's getting triggered.
Yes, and I also invited the lizard people, but they couldn't come. They were too busy playing cards with George Soros or stuff like that.
Oh, it's always at this point where we kind of diverge into the most crazy topics.
And I think maybe we'll leave that for the post-recording conversation. And maybe this is actually a good time to wrap up.
It was an absolute pleasure, Ben and Josh, for having you here with us today. Thanks for your time for joining us. It was awesome chatting to you. And as always, to the audience, we will see you in the next podcast episode.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
I think this is the perfect time to wrap up the show. If you liked this podcast, tell your friends about it. If you didn't like it, tell your enemies about it. Hey, it's Philip. There is a few little things I quickly want to add. If you enjoy Command-Shift-Left, make sure you leave us a rating on the platform you are streaming from. We will be eternally grateful. If you are not doing so already, make sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn by typing in @JustShiftLeft, all one word, for any updates and new episode releases. Finally, this podcast is fully supported by Permit.io, of which me and Or work at, so make sure you go ahead and check out Permit if you need a simple solution to implement authorization. That's all, and we will see you in the next episode.